What do you want to be when you grow up? It's a question that's asked every day, everywhere around the world. Virtually everyone's been asked that question. The problem is, it's a question that's outlived its usefulness. When I was growing up, we kind of figured we'd have one job for life. Today, on average, most people have 14 jobs before the age of 40. What are the 14 things you want to be when you grow up? Doesn't quite have the same ring to it, does it? I wanted to be a journalist. It's what I studied as an undergraduate at university and what I was lucky enough to become when I graduated. But 21 years ago, almost to this very day, I realized how useless the "what do you want to be when you grow up" question really was. And I'll admit it was a strange place to find out. It was the spring of 1992. I was on assignment in Sarajevo as a journalist, in war-torn Sarajevo, in the capital of Bosnia, in the heart of Europe. It was the beginning of what was to become the longest siege of a capital city in modern warfare. I was in a bulletproof car with two of my colleagues, my cameraman and my translator, and we were getting set to cross a bridge when a car swooshed in front of us. It was like a bad Hollywood movie. One car in front, one car in back, and ours uncomfortably in between. So you know what's going to happen next, right? We're crossing the bridge. In the middle of the bridge, the first car slams on the brakes, the one behind us pins us in, and armed soldiers jump out of both. They pull us out of our car, and they start yelling and screaming and yelling, and it was clear that what they wanted was our bulletproof jackets. In the flurry of that crazy moment, I had the calmest out-of-body experience as I looked down and I watched all of this unfold in slow motion, and I thought, why am I here? I mean, really, why am I here? It wasn't for a paycheck. Journalism is not the kind of job you go into to get rich, apart from a very few exceptions. And it wasn't because my boss told me to go. That would be a really silly reason to put your life at harm. The reason I was there, standing on that bridge with a gun to my head, was because of something much deeper and much more personal. As a child, my father would talk to me about his having grown up in Spain during the Spanish Civil War. And my mom talked to me about growing up in Belgium during World War II. I grew up in Canada as I watched the civil rights movement unfold in the US and the fight for women's rights taking place all around me. So very early on, there was something deeply embedded in my DNA about social justice and about wanting to make a difference. And that's why I was on that bridge, even in the face of personal danger. It wasn't just a job. It was about who I am, my sense of purpose, what motivates me in a deep and fundamental way. And that made it worth it. Journalism was a good fit for me. Now, clearly, the bridge episode ended well. The soldiers got the bulletproof jackets they wanted, and they let us go, scared but in one piece. Time and time again, I would go to places where I saw people's lives change virtually overnight as chaos swept in around them and they looked on in disbelief. There's something about that kind of chaos that magnifies everything about the human condition, because you see people at their most raw and vulnerable, sometimes ugly, sometimes heroic. I will forever carry with me the memory of a young mother that I met in the market in Sarajevo. The market was an easy target for soldiers that were bombing from the nearby hills. It also happened to be one of the few places where you could buy and sell food in a city where there was none. No food, no electricity, no running water. And here was this lady with one packet of spaghetti and 2 candles. She was trying to make some money so that she could buy her 2 boys some chocolate on the black market. The boys had been cooped up in their house day in, day out because of the bombing and because of the snipers outside. And this was her way of giving them a treat, even though she had to risk her life doing it. Meeting people like that reporting from places like that, that's why I did what I was doing. It really gave me a sense of purpose. I was 33, and I thought I'd be a journalist my whole life, going from one war zone, one emergency, one story to another. And for several years I did. Sarajevo, Somalia, Rwanda, Iraq, Northern Ireland, Gaza, the West Bank. And far too rarely to places where we would go to report on a wrong being put right, like that historic, memorable day when Nelson Mandela was elected in South Africa. But my journalism career ended in Rwanda. A genocide against Tutsis, with as many as 1 million people killed because of their identity, led to a massive refugee crisis of mainly Hutus into neighboring countries. On this particular day, I was with my team in the northwest of the country, and we were watching as thousands of people were streaming back across the border, back into Rwanda. I was always struck by the silence of situations like that. If you can imagine the beginning of a marathon with that mass of people, it looked like that, but this was quiet and slow. The little energy that these people had in the baking sun with no access to water went to putting one foot in front of the other. In the evening, we were sending our news report back to Canada, and my editor in Canada said, "You have to call them Hutus and Tutsis. It's really confusing for people." Now, he may have been right. In the incredible transformation that has happened in Rwanda since, the new constitution makes sure that there is no distinction. But at the time, after all that reporting, it just seemed like our reporting had not made much of a difference. Not to the audience, not to the awareness of the audience back home, and certainly not to the people in Rwanda. And so I found myself thinking, like I did that day on the bridge in Sarajevo, wondering, why am I here? And I knew in that instant that my journalism career was over, because it just didn't feel like what I was doing was making enough of a difference. It took me a while, and I couldn't have put it quite in these words at the time, but I needed to find another way to channel my commitment to social justice and a new way of making a difference. It took me about 1.5 years. I was pulling together a financial pillow. I was doing some heavy-duty networking, and I became a consultant, doing 3 things. I taught journalism in developing countries. I did media training with NGOs, and I led bike tours in France and Spain. Because with your sense of purpose, it's really nice to have some pleasure, too. Career 3 came out of career 2, the one when I was consulting. And I started in humanitarian work, first with the Red Cross, Red Crescent, and later with UNICEF. Having seen both of them at work, I knew that their global missions matched my worldview, and they certainly matched my sense of purpose. So again, when I would ask myself that "why am I here?" question, in both cases I knew the fit was right. One of my favorite quotes is attributed to Confucius, although I've seen a lot of people wondering if he really said this, but it goes like this: "Choose a job you love, and you'll never work a day in your life." I don't know if he said it, but I sure love the spirit of that quote, because it gets back to that essential "why am I here?" question, and figuring out fundamentally what it is that motivates you and gives you your sense of purpose. Do something you love, and you'll never work a day in your life. Now, for some, that something changes and evolves over the years. And it's not all about work either. Family, friends, personal growth, and yes, finding your place in a world that is changing exponentially around you. Which is another reason, by the way, that I think we should give up the what do you want to be when you grow up question. How do you answer that when there aren't enough jobs to go around in the first place, and when many of the jobs you may do haven't even been invented yet? The top 10 in-demand jobs in the US in 2010 didn't even exist in 2004. Futurologists are in the business of predicting trends. They've come up with what they say are the 10 most lucrative jobs that will exist in the year 2030. Now, I had to write these down because I hadn't heard of one of them before. But just to give you a taste. Body part maker. People who create living body parts for athletes and soldiers. Nanomedics. People who create very small implants for health monitoring and self-medication. Vertical farmers, people who farm crops vertically rather than across fields to save space. We're preparing students for careers that don't exist yet, to use technology that hasn't been invented yet, to solve problems we don't even know are problems yet. So how do you manage that chaos when change is the only constant? Robert Safian is the editor and managing director of an award-winning business magazine called Fast Company. And he's coined a term called Generation Flux. It's not a demographic, it's a psychographic. And it refers to people who succeed by brilliantly managing chaos. For Generation Flux, chaos is not scary, it's oxygen. They thrive, regardless of age, on embracing flexibility, adaptability, an openness to learning, and they're really good at making decisions even though they know that the business climate can change radically and rapidly. As entrepreneurs, as innovators, as people who pioneer ideas, they just come up with new ways of doing things and invent their own jobs in the process. Now, a few years ago, I was busy having another one of my why am I here moments. I was turning 50 that year, and I was thinking about how I might celebrate that occasion. I thought about all the things that I wanted to do in my life that I hadn't done yet. So here's the dream list. Be an Olympic athlete. That was not going to happen. Travel the world. I'd done a fair bit of that already. Go to Harvard. And that was it. I wanted to go back to school at age 50 because I wanted to go back to school because I wanted to learn another language. Given my background, I speak 3 languages. I knew I needed to learn a 4th. I needed to learn the language of business and get to know things about human capital the way I know things about human rights. Why? Because I wanted to change my own career, and I wanted to get more involved in shaping public policy with governments and working with the private sector on corporate social responsibility. So that's what I did. So why am I here? It's still about social justice. It's still about making a difference. And it's a lot about learning. Learning throughout life. Being a full-time student, not just in a classroom, but through life. Last month, the United Nations released a report that tells us that life expectancy went up faster in the 20th century than at any other time in history. On average, the global life expectancy is 69 years. We're among friends here, let's just round it up to 70. Even though in Malaysia it's even higher than that. 70 years, that's 25,550 days. That's a lot of time to fill, especially when the world is spinning as quickly as it does, and when you're likely to have to reinvent yourself several times along the way. So I found it really useful to keep checking in every now and again and to keep asking myself that "why am I here?" question. For me, it's helped to avoid getting swept up and lost in the rush of everything, and especially to avoid sleepwalking through life. What do you want to be when you grow up? Better yet, why are you here?